Hello everyone, this is Betsy from Ideas Times 2. I'm very excited to have a tutorial for you today. This tutorial will be on how to make a soft cover journal cover with raw edges. This was the same type of cover I used on my Sea Theme journal, which was our giveaway from, was it already a couple months ago? It was several weeks ago we had that giveaway journal, and lots of people wanted to know how we made the cover. So this is a tutorial on that. Here's one I already made, and this is what it will be. I even have the same fabric here. So what you will need is a piece of outside cover fabric. Now, the size will depend on what you want your journal to be. This is a small-ish journal. It winds up to be about a little over 5 inches by 7 inches, so a little over 5 by 7. So if you have a bigger size, just adjust your measurements accordingly. But whatever the case may be, all of the pieces I'm going to show you now will be the exact same size. The cardstock will be cut a little smaller, but I'll tell you about that in a second. So this is the outside cover. So the outside cover can be, it would be great if it were a good quality quilting cotton. If you have a thinner fabric, it's going to be more difficult. You might have some things showing through that you don't want to show through. So I'd say a good quality outer fabric. It could also be home deck weight, which is what the Sea Theme journal was. It was a home deck weight. But this is just quilting cotton, or a nicer quality cotton. And so that's the cover. So you want a cover piece. Mine is 7.5 by 12 inches. That's just the size I wanted for my journal, which winds up to be like a B6 size. Then you'll want a piece of fabric the same size of your lining, the inside of your cover, which will be that. I'm going to try to get that to stand up. There we go. So your outside fabric, your lining, you'll need a piece of canvas, neutral colored canvas. For this journal, you know, like maybe even black would be fine, but this is what I have. So heavyweight canvas. I'm not talking about home deck weight. I'm talking about actual real canvas. So that's what this is. It's nice, thick. It's got a lot of tooth, and it will give your cover lots of body. A piece of cardstock. This is cut just a tad bit underneath the size of my fabrics because I don't necessarily want that to show on the edges. It might, and it's fine, but I just prefer it if it doesn't. And so make sure it's a neutral color just in case it does show. Okay, and the other thing will be 3 glue sheets. Now, what do I mean by glue sheets? Joanne, I think this will be for you because you had a question about the glue sheets. It goes by the name of Heat and Bond, Wonder Under, Steam a Seam. Those are all brand names of glue sheets. So what it is, it's a sheet of glue that's activated by heat. And it has glue on one side, release paper on the other. You activate the glue, peel off the release paper, and then place on top whatever item that you want. It could be paper or fabric. So make sure you get the light kind, which will be helpful when you are going over to your sewing machine for top stitching. Don't get the ultra hold or anything. It will, you know, your sewing machine will hate you, so don't do it. So 3 sheets of that in the exact same size as your cover. All right. So let's get started. Excited to show you this. All right, I filmed this, I think it's 6 times now, so this is it. This is going to do it. This is it. No more. We are going to do it. All right, so take your cover fabric, place it right side down. Also, I should mention, so a lot of times in our journals we like to have a book plate or some image decoration on the front. Obviously with this fabric is doing all the work for me 100% of the work for me because it's so beautiful and it has this great design on the front. So I don't need to do anything. If you are going to put a book plate or image of some kind, I will let you know at what point would be a great time for that, especially for sewing. So if you're just gluing it on, you could definitely glue it at the very, very end. Okay, but so for now, outside fabric, right side down. Okay, then you're going to take one of your glue sheets, lay it on top. Precise cutting is a great idea. I know for a fact that I did not precisely cut this as I usually do. I'm usually a very precise person when it comes to cutting things. I just have that thing where it has to be precise. But it'll work out even if it's not. See this jagged edge? I knew that was there. I just wasn't worried about it. So according to your manufacturer's instructions, read them. Do you read? Do you read them really? I just heat up my iron and move it along until the glue is stuck. That's what I do. It's just what I do. I should mention too, I haven't set up the playlist yet, but my sister and I each have a video on how to make soft covers, different styles, different ways, using different materials. But I will put those links down below, and then I will try to get on today and put a playlist together of this video plus the other two so that you have all of our soft cover tutorials in one spot. Alright, so I just ironed it until it was adhered. I should mention, so you're going to need an iron. Obviously, you knew that because I said you iron it on. The other thing that's helpful to have is going to be a score tool or a score board. That is for your cardstock, which I'll show you in a minute. So those two things will be handy making this as well. And you need scissors and some cutting tools and your sewing machine as well. Sorry, my throat is a little froggy this morning. Alright, so this does have to cool before you peel off the release paper. So when you peel this off, if for some reason it didn't get stuck all the way and you've got residue on the top of the release paper, residue on the fabric, don't worry about it. Just put the release paper back over and re-iron it, and it should come out just right for you. So just check a little corner and it looks really good. So we are going to just peel that off. Now, okay, this is good. I'm glad this came up right now. If you have a thread that gets caught under here, so do look for threads before you put your glue sheet on here. If you do get a thread, as I did here, it's sort of hanging off here, but it's also stuck in the glue. Just take a needle, pick at the glue sheet just slightly until you poke through that glue sheet and go underneath your thread. And I don't know if you can see it, I have a little loop of thread right here, and then just pull it up. In this case I can just probably pull it backwards, but I wanted to show you. Because surprisingly, if you even have a little thread, okay, it's just a thread, you wouldn't think it would matter, but it does. It leaves like a bump on the other side, and no bumps, no bumps. All right, so the next step to give this cover a soft feel and like a little texture is to put your canvas next. So put your canvas on here next. Now canvas is thicker, right? It's thicker, so you're going to need to press this a little bit longer so it adheres to the texture of the canvas. And I'm going to do this with my thinner fabric on top just because the heat will go through it better. So maybe give it an extra little loving, little extra heat so that it sticks to that textured canvas. And you should be good to go. It works out really well. It gives body and flexibility to the cover. I think that may be good. Let's check. Make sure to check. Okay, it's looking really good. Alright, so to flip it back over. It'll just give you easier reference. Alright, so now you guessed it, right? We need another glue sheet. So let's take our glue sheet and iron it on. You know the drill. Until it sticks. Tell me if you read instructions. Maybe you do at the first, and then after that you're like, he ain't got it. But sometimes even if I haven't used it for a while, I still don't read the directions. I would also like to say for this project, like for a lot of sewing projects, I prefer Steam-A-Seam, but for this project and maybe some more heavyweight sort of crafting projects, I think Heat and Bond is the best. You know, you use what you have. Use what you have and what you like, but it's just something I've kind of noticed. And some of them can be more expensive too. I think Steam-A-Seam is one of the more expensive brands, but I'm also a quilter, a little bit of a snob when it comes to applique. So let this cool for a bit. Otherwise you might peel up your glue a little bit. So sorry to make you sit through this, but it has to cool slightly even. Alright, got a couple, Cindy and I both have videos we want to get up, tutorials, so we have lots of things coming up. Hope you'll stay tuned for that. Alright, so peel it away. And I never showed you originally, but you can see the shiny glue on there, so that's when you know it's all good. I have a little thread there. Not so much worried about this one because it looks almost like a little fuzzy, and it's by the canvas, so it might actually be fine, but we need to get it off if possible. Trim, take care of your threads. Alright, I should have done this maybe earlier, but the next step is the cardstock. So take your cardstock lengthwise at the top of the score board. Mark your middle, whatever size you're using. Like I said, mine is 12 inches, so 6 is my middle. So I'm going to score at 6. And then on each side, score about 3/4 of an inch on each side of your middle at 1/8 inch increments. So just every single line, every single increment on your board, until you get, so my middle is 6, so it'll be 6 3/4 that I'll stop at. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 3, 4, 5. Instead of doing the math, I just counted my lines. So you'll stop at 5 1/4 over here. And this just makes your cardstock more bendy. Makes your spine, you can ease your spine into a bend a little bit better when you've got that scored. Okay, excited, we're getting, I mean, if you can believe it, we are really, really close to being done here. Alright, so take your, and it doesn't matter which, side of your cardstock. Now, we will have to iron onto the paper, but the glue sheet does melt easily, so I don't think we'll damage the paper. I've never had that trouble, so I should have centered this a little better, but that's alright. It'll still work out just fine. It won't be a problem. Okay, until it is stuck. Alright, and cool, right? Always cool. Alright, well, before you, it would have been a good time, so before you put the glue sheet on the canvas, So you've got your canvas, your glue, and your outside cover. Now, that time would have been a great time to put, just if you have something to sew on the front, to sew it on the front. You could even sew a spine piece on, as I did here. So here's a little traveler's notebook I made, the same exact cover, but it's a traveler's notebook. You could sew your spine piece on now, or before the cardstock and the glue. So canvas at the bottom, sew your spine piece on, sew your image on, whatever you are going to do for sewing the additional pieces on, I should say, because we're going to sew around the edge at the end. But so I did forget that, and I apologize. But if you're going to glue something on, now don't glue your spine piece on, that will never work. You can sew it through all of the layers. See what I mean? You can sew it through all of the layers. Your machine will take it just fine. Trust me, my machine is not good. I have no special settings, nothing. I just sew through this and it works great. But you will have, you know, your sewing marks. Like this one, I sewed the spine piece on at the end. I can't remember why I did that, but I did it. And it leaves a line. It's no big deal. Like it's not offensive or anything. This one may be a little bit more, you know, like, I don't know if I want, you know, a square here, but you could. It doesn't really matter. Even if you did do that and you wanted to cover it up, you could just place another image on the front here and just glue it on, and it'll cover up the stitching. So that's the point where you would sew something onto the cover if you don't want the stitching to show through to your lining. Now, if you don't care about that, then don't worry about it and save it till last. So that's a little step that I forgot to mention. All right, so let's take this cardstock and what? Scream, tell me. Yes, glue sheet. Glue sheet. So we are going to glue this on. Make sure it's adhered. So your edges are raw, and you may be wondering, well, I don't like that. Well, then this probably is not the method for you. But let me just tell you, I mean, it took me a minute to get used to it because I'm used to sewing things and having the raw edges under all the time. So it took me a minute to get used to it, but I love it now. It's rustic. It's a little bit rustic, but if you use this method or something similar, you don't have much fraying. It is raw, and you can trim these little pieces. Like this is not even trimmed yet, and look at how neat it looks. So it's a finished look. With the glue sheets, it helps the fraying to not happen as much. So anyway, that's just a little note on that. Let's see if this is cool. Feels good. But the problem with that is I'm getting the heat as I blow myself too. So but since I'm bending it, it's peeling up right here, but I think that's because the glue is stuck. So it is. Okay, this is the last step of the gluing, ironing process. So take your lining fabric. Now, if you have a top and a bottom, make sure you're, you know, getting that straight. But this is an overall pattern, so it didn't matter. So put this on top of all your layers that you've done already. Center it. I had a little dip right here, and I knew that, but I am going to show you how to trim all this when we're done. Which, I mean, how hard can it be, right? You just cut it with the scissors, or you take it to your cutting mat with your rotary cutter and cut it. It's not hard, but I will show you. I was going to mention something else. Oh, I know. Alright, so your fabrics should be nice and ironed and flat before you start any of these steps, right? And so I am mentioning things out of order a little bit. After filming so many times, I guess I got a little too excited. Anyway, so one of my very favorite of all times, spray for getting the wrinkles out of fabrics is called Best Press, and it's pricey. It is so expensive. I only tried it because I worked at a quilt shop, and they were unfortunately going out of business, and I got this on clearance. So I tried it, and I used it sparingly because I loved it so much I was like hoarding it. So when I got down to the end, I noticed that the spray had more of a vinegar smell, and it does say shake well, but I apparently forgot to read the instructions. So anyway, it was heavily saturated with vinegar at the bottom. And so, but I kept using it and it worked great. And I thought, oh, if this is made out of vinegar, maybe I can make my own spray and give, you know, experiment a little bit. So I have experimented. So use equal parts white vinegar, equal parts like distilled water, put it in a spray bottle. I just reused this. Give it a shake, although I'm sure it incorporates just fine, and then use that as your spray. This is amazing. This white vinegar and water, it is amazing. It is diluted, but it does have a little bit of a vinegary smell, as you would guess, but it dissipates. It's not that big of a deal. Like if I would have sprayed this fabric before I glued it on and left it for 10-15 minutes or whatever and smelled it, I would not smell vinegar. So I'm just a little DIY for you. You should try that. It's really cool. Okay, so now all of this is stuck down and our cover is taking shape. It's taking shape. You can see I need to trim a little. This is probably the worst job I've ever done for cutting, but it's okay. So here, I'm not going to do this on my iron mat because I don't want to get it full of threads. It's a nice one of those nice felt mats, and I just adore it. So give it a trim. I'm just trimming for the sake of the video here. I'm just trimming with scissors. And I'm sorry to bore you with all this trimming. But that is another reason why you're going to probably make your cover just a tad bit bigger, or you could just cut your dimensions bigger with the plan of trimming so that it's nice and neat. All right. I don't think I'm going to finish doing this on camera because I don't want you to have to watch all this. So, all right, so you can see this is trimmed up somewhat. I still didn't do a great job. This is not trimmed, but just trim it up all the way around. Use your rotary cutter in your mat if you have one, if you like to do that. Because, I mean, it's brilliant, right? But also scissors work just fine, so do that. Now, the next step is to top stitch. So I think the top stitching gives it a wonderful look, and I'm going to see if you can, I have to change my light up a little bit. Can you see the wonky sewing on there? Okay, I did it in red for a little bit of a contrast, and then I used red in the bobbin, which blended in with the lining, which I like that look, but you could definitely use any color you wanted. If you wanted to do black here, that'd be perfect. So what is wonky sewing? So you start at a point. I usually start like at the top center, and then you go around and you'll go in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out, all the way around. Go slowly around the corners so that you don't, fall off the edge. And then when you get up to the part where you started, just do the opposite. So go out and in, out and in, out and in, out and in, all the way around until you get to the place where you started, and then do a little back stitching. That's all it is. You could choose to do a quarter, just a quarter inch or a double stitch of just plain top stitching, and that would be beautiful as well. I just chose to do a little wonky sewing. This is a little rustic, design, so that's what I chose to do, and it is easier. You don't have to take so much care to make everything straight, and I like the look of it. It's up to you. So that would be the next step, is to do our top stitching, and then it will look like this. Oh, I forgot to mention, so as you're trimming, make the corners rounded. That will help with fraying on the corners, and it'll just give it gives it a nice look, I think. If you choose to, you can just round the corners, and all I do is just eyeball it and round the corners, because otherwise you're gonna have to find some sort of template, draw around it, and then cut. And you can do that. That is perfectly fine. It's up to you. Okay, so now you've top stitched and you've got this beautiful flat cover. So how do we get it to look like a book? All you're going to do is just manipulate it. So just manipulate the thing. I usually start like this, so my rounded palm is this way. Inside cover, what I usually do, I don't think I've ever sewn the pockets in, but if you choose to have pockets here, you know, take your heavy cardstock for your pocket, sew around it, sew around the paper, and then glue it on here. That is what I would do. You could, you know, choose to sew your pockets on before you do this, but it is really hard to keep everything lined up, so I mean, that is up to you as well. But I usually just, you know, do some stitching around my pockets and then glue them on. Fabri-Tac, you know, we all know, right, the beacon glues, and Fabri-Tac is my favorite. I think there is a slight difference, in my opinion, but this is designed to hold things onto fabric, so it does a great job on pockets. Okay, manipulate it. You've got your score marks in your cardstock, so it's going to help you tremendously to get this thing to stay rounded. And another favorite thing is just to roll. See, I'm rolling up and then move it and roll it back, up and back, up and back, and then it'll start to form a book like this, and your spine will be nice and rounded. Okay, now what do we do with the cover? What do we do with this, right? Now that we have this, it has no pages. So, what I'm going to do, so these are for a different project. They're blue, right? They're for this project. So, how do you do this? Okay, so you put together your signatures. We also have some videos on that, and I'm sure you can find lots of videos online. So what you do is you put together a signature. These papers are plain. This is naked right now. I'll be decorating it up in a little while, but so you're going to take your signatures. You're going to probably the way to do it would be to get a template made out of cardstock or something with your how many signatures you have. So you'd have 3 lines of holes. Put your template over this and poke holes right in the cover. All right, and then you're going to line up your signatures with your holes, and you're going to have your thread. So waxed linen thread, embroidery thread, whatever you have, and your needle, your sharp needle, and you're going to do a pamphlet stitch right through the cover. I don't have any, let me look and see if I have a book with that on so you can see that. I'm looking, I'm still here. Okay guys, I'm back. So here's a journal I have in my Etsy shop. And it's very similar method. It's made out of a manila envelope. But what I did was I pamphlet stitched my signatures. See if I can get to the end here. Directly into the book. And see here I top stitched instead of did the wonky sewing. So I sewed them onto the cover, and here are the strings. So just make your strings, you know, decorative or plain, it doesn't matter. And then you get a look like this. Okay, so sew your signatures directly into your book. Because it's made out of fabric with a few layers, it'll go together just fine. So you would take your 3 signatures and stitch them in, and then you'll have a book like this. You know, decorate the pages as you would like. Any sewing would have to be done. If you're just taking this to the machine to sew it, you know, anything, any pockets or anything will have to be done before you sew it in. So sew it in directly to the cover. And then the other option is what I am doing with this same exact size, and this is for this little traveler's notebook, and you use eyelets and elastics and a closure. Okay, so that brings us to the next thing, is closure. So how do you do a closure on this? So since this, you can sew through this no problem, you can just sew ribbons. Sew a ribbon here, sew a ribbon here, and then tie it in a bow on the side, which would be adorable. Or you could have something that wraps around, either a fabric or like a red and white checked fabric or black and white checked fabric. Wouldn't that be adorable? So that could just wrap around here, tie in a bow, or you don't have to tie in a bow. You could tie it into a loose knot, or just have something heavy on one of the ends and just slip it down. Elastic, you could put an eyelet here and just have an elastic closure. Just keep that in mind when you're sewing your signatures in. So I would do that first probably. So you could do that. I mean, that would be an awesome look for this. You could have an elastic or some kind of a string that goes around this way to keep it shut. Or if it stays shut, you can just leave it, right? Anyway, that's how to make our soft, one of the ways to make our soft cover. There are plenty of ways, and I know other people have ways too. This is just the way that I've come up with that I really, really like, just because of the way it looks, and it's still rustic and simple to do, and yet it looks nice and polished. So that is it for today. I hope this helped you. Please like this video, subscribe to our channel. We have lots more content coming up, as I mentioned. I will leave the links for our other softcover videos down below. Thank you so much for joining me. Your time is so valuable. And take care, everybody. Goodbye.